our air conditioning and heating is working, kind of. We're figuring it out, but you can't hear it, can you? It's probably like that myth about the emperor and his new clothes. We think we have one. Because there's a big thing out there, like Diana said, it's huge. So I'm so full and so sad and so longing to be able to articulate that in a way that we stay together on this spiritual journey. Charlie and I just returned from 10 days in Toronto, Canada, at the World Parliament of World Religions, the Parliament of World Religions. So amazing, so transformative, so sad, so beautiful. I want to thank Roy and Diana for sending me that poem because it really spoke to our hearts, how we feel in these days, in these trying times, in these beautiful times. And thank you, Damien, for reading it with such beautiful heart as well, to bring it even closer to the home of the heart. So my privilege of that journey fills me with an idea of wanting to come home to all of you and to share that message, because I was fortunate to go. The interfaith movement of our global community, all of the faith paths that were there, over 200, all recognizing, all cheering, to know that there is only one God, whatever they name it, whatever their doctrines are. We all agreed on that. There's only one. So our hearts are ushered into this great knowing that we find that as our common ground, and that as our anchor of faith. And then to return home and to know that our fellow town in paradise is just wiped away. I tried to get Reverend Andy to come and share the platform today so that he had a place to be able to give his word, to hold his people. And I'm sure that they've chosen to be closer in their community at Chico. But I'm waiting to hear from them. And as soon as I hear from them, I'll share with you what we can do to help hold them, since all of our hearts are a little more strengthened, having suffered much of what they're going through right now, though I think theirs is so much worse, so much lives lost. So, and then I think of the veterans, those of you that stood today. I really wanted to see you and to honor you and to know that I'm sure at times when you were doing your service that it was scary, that you did face fear. And we're going to talk a little bit about, it's a kind of an odd topic, the fear and punishment. It sounds so Baptist, but sorry, I've just come back from an interfaith thing, but that it just feels like, but you know, there was Baptists there and they were like, yeah, we're on board with this too. Episcopalians and the Catholics, there's just such a rich diversity, and it just brought it home. And so I'm excited about all of that, yet still I want to speak to you with what's in our hearts right now, because time keeps moving. You know, we had the shootings this week, and we had an elections this week. This time keeps propelling us forward, and we can hardly digest what just happened. And then there's something new for our hearts to hold. So this Parliament of World Religions, they made passionate statements on having so many of our faith paths move towards a global ethic, something that we could all ground ourselves in. And so they had strong platform, and they invited us to go back and share. And so often I've tiptoed around some of these subjects because I'm a true believer of separating anything political with anything spiritual. However, it has become a spiritual issue for all of us to pay attention to our planet, to our climate, to our earth, to our soil, to our water, to our air. And so it's no longer in the arena of politics for me. It's in the arena of let us push a pause button and see where are we with all of this. Now let me go back to the ideas. You see, we've been conditioned in our minds. We've all went to school here in America, most of us, and our history classes told us a certain story, right? And now we're finding those stories weren't accurate. That the indigenous people in our country, the Native Americans, suffered a lot on the behalf of people coming in, the colonial times, and all of that was a whole different story than we were once told. However, those stories are so embedded in us, it's hard to push them aside. And we say, I think about this because have you ever had, like, you know your story is so right because it's yours personally. Have you known that? And you try to share it with somebody and they're not listening. And you just want to be right because it's your story. You're the character in it and they're not listening. I feel like that's what some of the indigenous people of our entire planet have been trying to knock on our heads and saying, listen, there's another side here. And so we've watched our rainforests go down, and we've watched rivers dry up, and we've watched the soulful call of the African nations to pay attention to the deprivation of the water. There was one story where they had a day coming. It was called the day of the 0 day. And that's when everybody at that day were going to have to ration their water. They had armed forces out. People were only going to be allowed a certain bucket of water for a week. And one of the mottos was, whatever you can carry on your head. Wouldn't we be like out? You get as much water as you can carry on your head. And so they got together and they really came together as the townspeople, and they figured out ways to conserve water. Fascinating. And they were able to stop that day 0 from happening. But it took a community. It took a leaning in and a pressing in, as we heard New Thought teachers at the conference speak of. Let us press into each other and find new ways. And I think that's so beautiful and that's so powerful as we press into each other and we begin to say, okay, I've held this, but there's another way of thinking. Let me stretch. Let me stretch where I didn't realize my thoughts were bound up, where I thought I was so right. Let me listen to the other that thinks they're very right as well, and let us find common soil for our faith to become even stronger. So this idea of a global ethic condemning the abuse of the earth's ecosystems. This was testified by many of the human stories from all around the globe, and from the top scientists from every country, and from the religious faith leaders from every path had something to share on that. They also spoke to social justice, to poverty, hunger, and economic disparity, to the disregard for justice and the violence that we see often on our television screens, and the aggression and the hatred in the name of religion. They spoke to all of it, to the empowerment of women. And so all of this, when you sit and listen to some of the stories, it was a stew of fear from some of their sharing. You could see how horrific some of the stories were. There was one, let me share, she was no bigger. I don't think she could even reach this podium. She was as little, you all have the image in your mind, I'm sure, of Mother Teresa, that kind of a figure. This woman was from Afghanistan, and she had her very simple robe. You know, she had her scarf around her head and just pulled over and just up here, just talking very softly into the mic. She is a powerful woman, though, that woman in Afghanistan. She's in the legal arena, and a woman came to her crying, said, "You must save my daughter. You must save my daughter." This is the kind of fear that they endure. They have a way there. Her daughter was 8, and she was being traded for a bag of rice to a wealthy man to give away to a man that was 50 to be the wife and the mother of him, to take care of his family because he just lost his wife. And the mother was pleading with this Afghanistani lawyer to say, "Can you do something? This man is so powerful. Everybody's afraid to go up against him." And so this little lady just goes and she tells him to come and see her, and he kept ignoring her request, but she was persistent and she was not afraid. And he finally came to her office, but he came with all these armed guards and just ready to take her on. Just this little, and she just asked him why he was doing that this was a child that wanted to just play, that the child has seen enough war and enough destruction. Can't the mother raise her child and let her play? And he denied the request, but she didn't give up. You see, she didn't give up. She just kept being persistent and said, "I will give you 10 bags of rice if you return this girl and let her play." And finally, with her persistence, with her faith, with her nonviolent behavior and determination, the little girl was returned after a couple of months. Now, those stories prevail all in other parts of our world, stories that we just haunt us to just think, "Oh, that's just not right. That's a child." These child brides. It still happens some places in America as well, but let us stand up against those things that just feel so unjust. So we have these stories that cause our hearts to contract. And yet faith and love and persevering through these situations allows our hearts to grow and to blossom. So how do we steer ourselves towards this sense of a global order and away from despair and away from chaos? And that was the overall intention of this Parliament, is to see ways that we can look at our core values, to see what do we have in common on our journey. What is in every faith path? And then we affirm that truth and we start to live it through our actions. Now, the class that I'll be doing for just the 3 weeks is about, we know these things, right? But here it's called about love and action. What can we do? And that's the kind of idea I went with when I went to the Parliament. What can I do? Do you guys feel that way sometimes? We know these things are happening. What can we do? We sometimes feel so helpless and inadequate, but there's so much we can be doing. There's so much that we can stand for. There's so much that we can put our voice to, that we can give our resources towards. There's so much. And so I like this idea. If you're with me on this, it's the idea, when I have followed different faith teachers or any kind of leading of a teacher or a certain way of being, I want to see that who's ever talking about that they're walking their talk. Do you guys feel that way? I want to see the person walk their talk. If they walk their talk, and maybe I don't agree with everything they're doing, but if they really are that, I'm so impressed, and I'm so willing to support that, to So I want us to be in a place, I just invite us as a community in the center to begin to be able to walk our talk now, to invest our actions. And so recognizing that sometimes it's a fearful thing to do. The moment I came home, I was so jazzed up, I couldn't wait to come talk to you. And the first person I spoke to shut me down. And I went, oh, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. And I started to get fear. I started to feel the dang fear again. And I thought, no, I think I'm going to walk and talk even with the fear. And I invite you to do it as well. It doesn't mean that that's all going to go away. It just means that we're going to get stronger because God's stronger than all that we see going on. Our faith in that, knowing that the divine has the power to overcome all that we see as challenge or chaos. So let us look at our core values that are common in every faith path. Let us affirm that the truth and live it in our actions now. And this will start to lead. This is one of their statements of global empowerment, is to begin to see and really experience sustainable world order. So we start witnessing. Can we start today witnessing our interdependence on this planet, sharing? You see, we share the same air. We can smell what's going on from paradise. Our skies are relatively clear, thank God, but we can sniff the smoke and we remember our friends down there suffering in that air and in that sorrow. And we share the earth and the soil, the water, the plants. We share the animals. And so this all goes back to the golden rule. Do you remember what that is? Who can say it? Isn't that great? Each one of you raised from a different faith path in a different family, but you remember it, the golden rule. And so let us do unto others as you would have them do unto you, as you would do unto them. You can keep adding words to the golden rule to allow that to be a statement of truth. Because you see, within that statement, if you are going to live your truth and you say, I live by the golden rule, then you have to allow your actions, your words, your deeds to demonstrate that. And that means everyone. That means the inclusiveness of everyone. And so Pema Chodron had some wonderful ideas on this. And this idea of fear I speak to, and punishment, the punishment that is in these writings of Ernest Holmes through this particular chapter in Living the Science of Mind, speaks to not a punishment thrust upon you with the finger and saying, bad, you're so bad for doing that. It's that, again, in our upbringing, if you do that, then this is your consequence, right? Spankings. I remember my mom, you wait till your father gets home, and I'd be like, oh, that was the worst statement to hear and he always followed through. And we would go look at our little fannies with the big handprint on it, who had the biggest red one, and it was just like the punishment for whatever that we did. And we sort of accepted that as you grew up. I did this, therefore I'm going to get a spanking when my dad gets home. And so now I tend to, without knowing it, a little bit of a shudder when I'm around a dominant male. It's just imprinted in me. And so I have to rise above that fear and retrain myself. Look, I believe in the neuroplasticity of my brain and the power of this teaching to know that I can reframe these things and not be afraid. But I have to also acknowledge that that's there inside of me. Those seeds are there. They're in each and every one of us. So Pema Chodron invites us to look at the nature of fear itself. So how do you do that? You look at the very present moment. You stand right here where you are, right here in this seat, and you explore. You see, everything as it is. And you can see that in this knowing of present moment, there is a vulnerability to it. And it can be completely unnerving as she speaks to it, but it can be completely tender at the very same time. Now, having gone through the World Parliament, coming home and feeling just so invested in wanting to walk my talk, right away, another story that happened to me was in Sacramento. We were getting a cup of coffee and a chai tea before we returned to Sacramento, or to Redding. And a gentleman comes up with a backpack and another carry thing, kind of disheveled a little, not too bad. "How are you today?" And I said, "I'm good, thank you." And I said, "How are you?" And he said, "I'm good, thanks for asking." I said, "Oh, you're welcome. It's a beautiful day." And then he said, "I have no reason to live." And I'm like, that's a conversation stopper. And I kind of froze. I thought, all of a sudden, my mind started to twirl. And I thought to myself, am I looking at the next shooter? The next, because he started to tell me about that he was a war vet from Afghanistan, and he has nothing to live for. There's nothing good in this world. And I stammered. And I thought, I was disappointed in myself at the same time. You know how these things happen so quickly? You're just standing in this moment, and Charlie didn't hear any of it. He was on his way to his side of the car. And I just was like looking at him and looking at the car. And in my head, I kept thinking, trying to look at him deeply. And I said, I'm so sorry you feel that way. And part of me wanted to go over there and hug him. And I wished I had. But the fear took over. And he wandered off in that moment too, as my fear took over, and the moment broke right then. He just went off and was telling somebody else, "Hello, how are you?" And the story started again. I could hear it. But I thought, that post-traumatic stress is what happened in the other shooting. Are we missing it? Are we missing the opportunities to reach out and to embrace? I missed mine in that one moment. And yet, I followed him and I haven't let him go. May you be peaceful, may you be well, because he's imprinted in my mind and in my heart. He's been in my daily prayers. May you be peaceful, may you be loved, may you find a joy. So our world is offering us opportunities, right, with every breath, every time we turn on the TV or the computer, or everything that we listen to is an opportunity to be completely tender and at the same time absolutely in the present moment. So we get to know fear. We look deeply into it. And we're not trying to solve anything, but we're trying to undo the old ways of seeing, to see if our fear is even justified anymore. And it can be stimulated, fear can be stimulated so quickly by a smell, a taste. An old thought can percolate up, and suddenly you feel the trembling heart. And so Pema Chodron invites us to be the awakened heart of loving kindness, of compassion. And she says these words, it's our true heart. It's our true heart. I can see in the reaction of each and every one of you those moments when I said, what that war vet said to me, I have nothing to live for. I could see you all, your shoulders drop, your posture, your heart was touched as well. We can't help but let our hearts break. It's the nature of our heart to feel this compassion. So often we have hardened this sweet, sweet heart of ours in order to get through each day. But the invitation is to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and to keep that heart soft and yielding and open, and know that this is beautiful and it's also very sad. So we look with tender hearts, we look with the soft spots of our heart with an openness, and we see and recognize the ultimate truth. The world is asking us to tap in to our capacity to care, our capacity to love one another, our capacity to walk, to be willing to walk even when your knees are buckling, with that open-heartedness, and not to start to filter every experience through your stale opinions, through race consciousness, through profiling, as which I did in that brief, quick moment. It happens so quickly, and suddenly you're in dualistic thinking, and you're judging, and you're suddenly seeing self and other. And what is the basis of our teaching? We're all one. We're all one, and we want to walk in this unity, in this wholeness, and recognize that the Divine One is watching over us. So this aspiration and the action, knowing that our interconnectedness, we can face all suffering and recognize, I love this statement, I've read it in many writings, just like me, they're suffering. Just like you, they're suffering. We don't get to know all of those inner stories of the individual. We only see what they are projecting outside, and it could be a persona. But inside, they're a soul that has their struggles as well. So let us connect to this sense of fearlessness and be set free. Let's let go of what's blocking our wisdom, what is blocking our way. So we can know fear. It can lead us. It can lead us sometimes to being into betrayal. It can lead us into saying a lie. It can lead us into blaming. It can lead us into rejecting. We can cause harm through our fear. It can lock us into negativity and cause us to be in a state of stress and worry, and it can inhibit this change. That's what fear does. It can keep us locked in and stuck if unattended. But your spiritual practice, your spiritual joy is present moment. What am I feeling? And how may I turn this to the divine as I unite my heart with the divine and see it through the eyes of the beloved? So I'm going to invite us into a closing of a peace practice by Alan Locus. We were going to touch that place of fear. I invite you to touch your places of fear. What are yours? What are yours? Try to see it clearly. And see it right now in a way that you're calling forth a divine healing. That divine healing intelligence, have no doubt, it knows, capital I-T, it knows how to penetrate through the barriers of false thinking. It knows the true, pure consciousness that lies at the depth of your heart. It is Sat Chit Ananda. It is pure consciousness and bliss. It is the element of the heart that we all have in common. So I invite you to just close your eyes and soften. Soften to present moment. Feel the seat beneath you. Feel the temperature of the air as it brushes against your skin. Let your senses of hearing pick up the sounds of your community around you, of the friend sitting close to you, of the one before you, behind you. Present moment. Touching our fear, but not afraid. Lighting a candle into the darkness. And knowing that there is no punishment. There is consequence for our actions, but no punishment. And so we enter the fear, unafraid, willing to light that flame of greater understanding, light that way into a greater depth of discovery, to realize, I've thought this all my life. I could be wrong, just like me. The other is just like me. And the walls break down. And a truth and a love stimulates the next breath you breathe. You release the helplessness, the hopelessness. You're letting that go. You're letting go of betrayal. You're letting go of trauma. Let it go. Just right now. You're right in the middle of fear. And you realize beneath that and all around that is the divine, holding you, blessing you, guiding you, whispering to you, loving you, right there. Keep breathing and holding a greater idea. And as we move into a prayer of truth, we recognize that divine love right here, right now, is what prevails. That even though I walk with a taste of fear, I know that the divine love is greater, is more glorious, more powerful than the smallness of this fear. And it begins to dissipate right now as the flame of truth becomes brighter and brighter, and my heart is aglow with this truth, and I allow it to lead my way, to lead my word, to take pause and to be silent long enough that I hear a truth that needs to be spoken. And if I do not hear or recognize that truth to be spoken, I stay silent and offer the blessing. May you be peaceful. May you be well. May all beings be peaceful and well. May I be peaceful and well. May I lay down my old ways, and may I rise up into my true nature, led by the divine, led by love. I breathe that. I give thanks for recognizing that. We walk together in that. I release this prayer, loving each one of you, loving myself, loving the divine, loving all people from the depth of my being. So be it, and so it is. Thank you.